All right, welcome to the Charting Life podcast, where we aim to explore life's uncharted territories and overlooked parts of life, things we take for granted, that sort of thing, through meaningful conversations and always with a healthy dose of laughter. Before we get started, one of those things I have a hard time doing, I'm going to do it anyways. The like, subscribe, all of that definitely makes a big difference and helps. Comment, that is a big thing as well. I love being able to have that engagement. So comment on wherever you're listening, you're watching, or on Facebook. And the special thing I ask out of every episode is at some point in this episode, we're going to talk about something that's going to bring somebody else that you know to mind. Go ahead and share that episode with that person. As cool as it is that you share it with everybody on your socials, that's cool. But I really love it if you were just to share it to that one person that comes to your mind. And I think it's really meaningful in that way. And so today we have a really interesting guest, Robert Prash. He hosts the Creating Greatness podcast, which focuses on improving life from the ground up. His journey, which we'll get into some of that today, I believe, goes from prison to Christ to freedom and redemption. It's taken him to the greatest heights of the human spirit. Now he uses what he has learned to bring others along with his journey through change, through Christ, and becoming more happier, loving, and successful person. Anything else you want to add to that, Robert?
No, man, you got it. I'm looking forward to getting into it.
Absolutely fantastic. Well, I'd like to do some, let's just say, biographical stories, kind of get to know you a little bit. Why don't you tell us a story maybe from your childhood or your younger life, maybe of an incident or even a person who really shaped you, that kind of helped you kind of become who you are today, or who shaped you at some point along your journey in life?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that I have here. Number one, as a kid, although I was a extreme knucklehead, I was just automatically pulled towards the wrong things in life. But one of my saving graces was sports, and that's why I introduced a few different sports to my children. I will never force them to play anything, but I just want to introduce them and open their mind about it, because even later in life, when I became really knuckleheaded and made a lot of mistakes that caused me a lot of trouble, I had this deep seed of work ethic and brotherhood and companionship, sportsmanship. Those things really stuck with me. So as I went down that downward spiral of life and started crossing the lines that I thought I would never cross, as far as degrading behavior, whether it was using drugs or committing crimes, there was a certain line that I would never cross, because I had these fundamental lessons instilled within me from playing sports. That's number one.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Number two, which is, it was a little bit different, was a near-death experience that I had at the age of 14, where a bunch of friends and I were out in the bay. We were on a boat. We were young. I wouldn't do this now. I don't know what's in that water, but as a child, you don't think twice. You just jump right in. And we had some problems, man, and I almost drowned. And I remember getting to the point before being able to resurface and get some help, where a realization that I was going to die came over me. Now, I know a lot of people have near-death experiences and they go, "Oh, I seen light," and all these different things, or my family members welcome me. I didn't have experience any of that. What I did experience was an overwhelming sense of calm and peace. It's okay. Death is okay. It's part of the process, and it may be painful in some circumstances, but it's not the end. And that realization hit me at 14. So that was really a defining moment. And later in life, I explored death a little more, as far as reading books and trying to get situated with it, because it really is something that we have to face in life. And I believe that a lot of mistakes, a lot of untapped potential, and a lot of other life's problems revolve around our fear of death. And as far as people who shaped me, nothing worth mentioning. I had a lack of leadership, a lack of positive role models. What I didn't have a shortage of was role models that teach me the wrong things in life. Gotcha. And that's really how we all get started into the story,
Yeah. I think we'll definitely get into that in a bit. But yeah, there's people form you and help shape you. It's just which direction or in what nuances it's going to be. And you mentioned something there about that, kind of our fear of death. Something in our society, I think it's interesting. There was a point throughout most of human history we would honor and revere the elders.
Mhm.
And it's like, hey, so you have earned your white hair, sort of thing. And now we do everything we can to cover that up, or to try to make ourselves look younger. Even I know, like, within our society, it's kind of carved out the polite thing. It's like, okay, if a woman is celebrating her birthday, it's like, oh, okay, you're 29 again, right? When really she might be double the age. But the point is, like, and for us, like, there is a bit of politeness, which is totally fine. But when you put everything together, it's like, oh yeah, we're kind of terrified of death, I think.
Yeah.
And there's a lot in society. There's a lot, to even go into with that, in general. But I think those who, outside of some of the societal pools, I think if you're in Christ, you're going to find that fear of death should have a lot less hold on you. There's the famous verse like, "Oh death, where is your victory? Oh grave, where is your sting?" And I think I think it's really important. So I'm glad you had that experience, and I think it maybe we'll get into some of your story, but I think later on in life that is maybe solidified too. I'm assuming based off what I've heard from your story, but I don't want to get too far ahead here yet. I love travel. I love talking about travel. Do you have any travel stories, whether or not it was a vacation or not, anything like that, where it just kind of either things went really well or really horrible?
Yeah, amen, brother. I mean, on everything you said, amen.
Yeah.
It's that, great reference points there. And as far as traveling, I mean, really, as far as the last topic that you just mentioned, we could do a whole nother
Hmm.
show. And then in
Yeah.
turn, the traveling experience could be a whole nother show as well. And it actually taps into one of the other questions that you may ask or may not ask about experiences that shaped me and who I am. And traveling was that experience. In 2020, things went kind of haywire. Me and my wife worked a very traditional lifestyle. I worked, she worked, the kids went to daycare. We were running all over the place all the time.
Hmm.
We were lucky if we got a few hours together at the end of the night, or if we had a couple days off where we were both off and we could be with our children. And I didn't really see anything wrong with that. I saw this growing up. This is how everyone raised their kids. Well, really, someone else raising my kids while I was working all week. Around 2020, the world changed and things got crazy. And my wife said, you know what? I'm a little bit tired of this, and you're getting
Hmm.
laid off, and we're shipping our kids everywhere to go, and everything happening with what was going on during that time. And she says, I can make double the money what you and I make together if I do a travel nursing job. And we could travel all over the place, and you could stay home with
Hmm.
the kids, you could work on your podcast, you could start the business, which I've done now. And I just thought, wow, no way. I'm an old school traditional man. I'm a
Yeah. Yeah.
provider. I had a 401k. I had my own office. I was on salary. I had benefits. I was the boss. And I just go, no
Hmm.
way could I do something like that. But, it kept happening because of COVID and everything else. I was getting laid
Hmm.
off, and all these things were happening. And I go, you know what? I'm going to swallow my pride. Let's go, babe. Let's go and
Hmm.
see what life has to offer us, because this
Yeah.
life right here is not working out. So there we go, man. We went to Florida. We went to Hawaii. We went to Texas. We went to Alaska. We went to Arizona. We went to Costa Rica. We went to Jamaica. We went to Mexico. Now, all these
Wow.
different places are great, right? And I had a lot of fun there. And the most enlightening part of it was that we weren't vacationing. We were spending 90 days
Hmm.
minimum in these locations while my wife worked her contract. And I mean, I remember landing in Alaska at midnight. I got all my kids with me. You know, one of them is only 1 years old, and I
Hmm.
go out and try to catch a cab to the Airbnb, and the guy tells me your family won't fit and screams profanity at me. I mean, at like
Mm.
midnight in Alaska, I was like totally blind. That was my introduction to Alaska, was F you,
Wow.
buddy. And then
Yeah.
when we got to the Airbnb, the door was frozen shut. And I was
Ah.
outside Airbnb at 2 o'clock in the morning with my whole entire family, even my young children. Luckily, I ran out to the street and I waved the guy down, and he got us to a hotel. You move on to like Mexico. Mexico seems great. But if you ever travel off resort, I drove to Mexico from Arizona. And let me tell you,
Okay.
you're going to see some really wild stuff. And when you cross that
Hmm.
border in your car, you may feel differently about it. You know, you can move on to Hawaii. There was really nothing bad to say about Hawaii other than the traffic and
Hmm.
the crowds. Costa
Hmm.
Rica, I jumped off a waterfall. I mean, I could go on, but the main thing that traveling taught me was, you know, there's more than one way to skin a cat. You know, your way
Yeah.
may not be best. It may be best for you, and don't be dismissive of other people's traditions, cultures, and ways of life,
Hmm.
because in their part of the world it may be exactly what they need. And you could go even from state to state and see traditions or ways of life that you go, hmm. But that traveling put me in a mindset to go, you know what? Don't be so dismissive. Let's see what it's about. And we were able
Hmm.
to immerse ourselves in the day to day life for 90 days. And man, it taught me so much. It opened up my mind so much. I suggested everybody travel, especially
Hmm.
outside the country, if you could do it in a safe way.
Yeah, I mean that's incredible. That's something, especially when I was younger, I would have loved to do that. We got big roots down where I'm at now. But it's that's and you mentioned you're not just on vacation for a couple of months. It's you're living day-to-day life and everything. And that's where, so there's a question I used to ask people. And we before we were recording, you mentioned you're from New Jersey.
Yes.
Um, if I were to visit New Jersey and could only do one thing that makes me feel like I'm a native New Jerseyan, what would that thing be?
Man, I'm gonna have to take you get a slice of pizza. You know,
Slice of
I
pizza?
mean,
Okay.
I without even thinking, it just the pizza in New Jersey. I know New York guys will argue with you, but I mean, New Jersey's
Yeah.
got the best pizza. You know, if Philly's
Okay.
got the best cheesesteaks, and to give
Mhm.
New York their kudos, man, I never had a
Mhm.
better breakfast sandwich in the world than
Really?
I had in
Okay.
the New York deli. So if you was to come to Jersey, I might take you to Atlantic City and see the sights,
Hmm.
but first I take you to get a good slice, and we'd enjoy it.
Okay. Yeah, man, that's awesome. And there's one other thing I want to do a episode or a few about this at some point too, kind of about like men and women. But you mentioned that idea, like the traditional thing of, you're working, your wife is working too. But if anybody's going to quit their job and stay home with the kids, it's not going to be, the man. That's just so instilled in us. Like that's such a wrong thing to do. And you mentioned swallowing your pride, which is a really big deal. My situation, it's other than the traveling, we have some similarities in there. And I've gone through some of the stuff before, but basically, my son needs a lot more care, and so I'm the one who's staying home. And whenever in situations like what we have, you actually tend to have more men stay home with the kids in this situation. But at first, it was rough feeling that way. I'm like, man, this is odd. And then, but I'm also super busy doing lots of stuff, doing homeschool. I'm doing the podcast, and I'm a youth pastor as well. I'm doing, all like five other different things that I'm working on. Always working on some kind of a project
Amen.
that I'm doing something. But so it took a little bit of time to adjust to that. And I think the last thing I'll say, just as a fun little just nugget, based off of some of my studies and research, historically, it wasn't necessarily that the man went out and worked and brought home, money for the family. I mean, communities like we don't they didn't have the global community, 100 years ago, or basically pre-industrial revolution. All of history was the man and woman are working at home together, whether you were a baker or whether you were a blacksmith, and everybody in the family knew everything. And so if somebody, was sick or couldn't perform the jobs, whether it was the man or the woman, they would get in and do all the stuff. And so I think 2020 gave us a really interesting view of where people were working from home a lot more too. And I'm thinking pre-industrial revolution or post-industrial revolution. That's the closest we've ever gotten to traditional household. I feel
Mhm.
like was when everyone was working from home and being home together. Instead of being with your kids 3 or 4 hours a day, maybe you're with them, you know, almost every waking minute. But anyways,
Yeah,
which
no, you
is
get on the flip
yeah.
side of that, man. But I mean, you mentioned a couple of really strong points before we move
Mhm.
on. Is a, you know,
Yeah.
the thing about the elders leaving, we
Hmm.
ship them off to homes. We don't glorify the fact that they made it. You know, we don't
Hmm.
uh, respect their knowledge. You know, I have my mom here with me, not out of necessity, out of choice. We have space in the house.
Hmm.
And my mom could teach my kids things that I never could.
Yeah.
Secondarily, when you're talking about men staying at home, now COVID shook the whole thing up, and maybe
Hmm.
people readdress their priorities. But ultimately, you know, we as men, we need to work, and it could be a
Hmm.
very dangerous road when you switch into this role, because there's all kind of things that will attack you, like during
Hmm.
boredom, you know. And
Hmm.
we did a whole episode about it, saying men should work, but we have to remember that our value only comes from God.
Yeah.
Society doesn't give us our value. So if you say I work a job and I make all this money, and people are like, "Oh, great, you're giving all the kids, you're giving your kids all the things you didn't have," and that's fine financially, but are you giving them love? Are you giving them attention? Are
Hmm.
you understanding what their needs are and what their strengths and weaknesses are? Like you said, I'm homeschooling and all these different things. We do
Hmm.
it all here. And when I'm home, I'm chopping wood, I'm feeding the chickens, I'm
Hmm.
homeschooling the kids, I'm exercising and teaching them how to exercise. We're going on many adventures out here in the woods in the neighborhood. So ultimately, yeah, men must work, and I believe that wholeheartedly. But society doesn't get to determine what kind of work we do. And
Yeah.
also, society doesn't give us our value. We can only get that from God. I've been
Hmm.
doing this show, Creating Greatness, for a very long time. And for a very long time, I was chasing greatness in the eyes of the world.